A mother German shepherd loses her newborn, and then she does the unthinkable. When a storm tears through the night, a heartbroken woman finds a soaked, trembling dog clawing at the mud, crying for pups already swept away. But what starts as a simple act of rescue turns into something far darker. The dog isn't just any stray. She's carrying a past someone powerful once buried. Soon, strange men appear, cages go missing, and the woman realizes saving this mother might cost her everything. Because this dog isn't just fighting to find her baby, she's fighting to expose a secret no one was ever meant to uncover. As danger closes in, how far will a mother, human or not, go to save the only life she has left? Drop a comment below and share which part of the world you're tuning in from today. If you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to subscribe for more. The rain hammered against Nell Harrow's windshield as she drove home from another long night shift at the grocery store. Her wipers fought a losing battle against the downpour, and the yellow beam of her headlights barely cut through the darkness. She was tired, bone tired. But something caught her eye near the flooded culvert off Mason Road. A shape moved in the darkness. Nell slowed her car, squinting through the rain-streaked glass. There, huddled against the concrete barrier, was a German shepherd. The dog's fur was matted and dark with rain, and she was frantically nosing at something on the ground, a soaked blanket that moved weakly in the wind and water. Nell's heart clenched. Without thinking, she pulled over, flicked on her hazard lights, and grabbed the flashlight from her glove compartment. The beam revealed the dog's desperate eyes, and beneath the blanket, tiny shapes stirred. "Hey there, sweet girl," Nell called softly, her voice barely carrying over the storm. She approached slowly, remembering the training her late husband Luke had given her about approaching frightened dogs. The memory of him working with his canine partner, Freya, hit her like a physical blow, but she pushed it aside. This dog needed her now. The shepherd whined, torn between protecting her puppies and seeking help. Nell crouched down, making herself smaller, and held out her hand. "It's okay, Mama, let me help you." The dog's nose touched her palm, warm and wet. Taking that as permission, Nell carefully lifted the sodden blanket. Her breath caught. There were newborn puppies, but only one was moving. The others. Nell swallowed hard and focused on the living. She had to act fast. "Come on, girl, let's get you somewhere safe." She opened her car door, and to her relief, the mother dog followed, keeping close to the puppy Nell cradled in her jacket. The drive to the emergency vet clinic was tense, with Nell breaking more than a few speed limits while the shepherd whined in the back seat. The clinic's lights were a beacon in the storm. As Nell pulled up, she saw a familiar truck. Animal Control. Inside, Officer Renzo Cabrini was already at the front desk, probably dealing with another emergency call. He turned at her entrance, his weathered face creasing with concern as he took in her dripping form and the desperate dog at her heels. "Nell, what have you got?" "Found her by the culvert on Mason," Nell explained quickly, revealing the tiny puppy. "There were others, but—" Renzo's jaw tightened as he understood. He helped her usher the mother and surviving pup into an exam room where Dr. Martinez took over. The next hour was a blur of activity. Warming blankets, IV fluids, careful examination of both mother and baby. "She's got a microchip," Dr. Martinez announced, frowning at her scanner. "Shows as an owner surrender from Riverside Kennels?" Nell exchanged a look with Renzo. Something felt off about that. The mother dog was too well-bred, too healthy despite her current state, to be a simple surrender case. While the staff worked on the paperwork, Nell sat with the shepherd, whom they'd started calling Bryn. The dog was calmer now, but her eyes never left her puppy. They'd fitted her with a cone to prevent her from pulling out her IV, but Nell could see the anxiety building in her rigid posture. "I'll just grab some fresh towels," Renzo said, stepping out. Nell nodded, but in that moment of distraction, everything changed. Bryn somehow managed to slip her cone, and before anyone could react, she'd chewed through her leash. With surprising speed for a dog who'd just given birth, she bolted past the startled staff and out into the rain. "Bryn!" Nell called, running after her. But the shepherd had vanished into the storm. Renzo came running out. "I'll call this in. Get some help searching." "No time." Nell cut him off, already scanning the ground. There, muddy paw prints leading toward the industrial district. "She's looking for her other puppies. She won't stop until she finds them." The rain was letting up slightly, but Nell was already soaked through. She didn't care. All she could think about was Luke, about how he'd never given up when someone needed help, about how she'd stayed home the night he'd responded to that last call, the night she might have made a difference if she'd been there with Freya as usual. "I'm going after her," Nell declared, her voice firm despite the tremor in her hands. "That mother lost most of her babies tonight. I won't let her lose her last one too." Renzo looked like he wanted to argue, but something in her expression stopped him. "At least take my flashlight," he said, handing over his heavy-duty beam. "It's better than that little one you've got. And Nell?" She paused. "Be careful. Something about this whole situation doesn't feel right." Nell nodded, already following the tracks into the darkness. She couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to Bryn's story than a simple owner surrender. The address, the timing, the desperate escape. It all pointed to something deeper, something wrong. But right now, all that mattered was finding that mother dog before she got herself hurt. Nell could still hear Bryn's keening in her mind, that sound of confusion and loss. It echoed her own grief, the emptiness that had haunted her since Luke's death. Maybe that's why she couldn't let this go. Maybe, in saving Bryn, she could start to save herself, too. The muddy tracks led her deeper into the industrial area, where empty warehouses loomed like shadows against the stormy sky. Somewhere out there, a mother was searching for her lost babies, and Nell Harrow was going to help her find answers, no matter where that search might lead. The beam of Renzo's flashlight cut through the misty rain as Nell followed Bryn's tracks. Her boots squelched in the mud, each step taking her deeper into the industrial district. The paw prints were getting harder to follow on the concrete, but Bryn's path seemed deliberate, leading toward a cluster of storage units at the edge of town. Nell's breath caught when she spotted fresh tire marks cutting through the mud near the storage park's entrance. The gate hung partially open, its padlock missing. Through the gap, she could make out rows of identical metal doors stretching into darkness. A faint whimper echoed from within. "Bryn?" Nell called softly, squeezing through the gate. Her flashlight beam swept across unit numbers until another sound drew her attention, a scratching noise coming from Unit 23. The door was rolled up just enough for a dog to slip under. Heart pounding, Nell crouched and shone her light into the gap. The beam reflected off metal bars. Crates, dozens of them, stacked nearly to the ceiling. And in the narrow aisle between them stood Bryn, pawing frantically at one of the lower cages. "Oh God," Nell whispered. She grabbed the handle and heaved the door upward, wincing at the loud rattle. The storage unit's interior came into full view, and her stomach turned. Every crate held puppies. Some looked barely weaned, huddled together for warmth. Others were so young their eyes weren't fully open. The smell of waste and fear was overwhelming. Bryn whined urgently, still focused on one particular crate. Nell hurried over and gasped. There, barely moving, lay a tiny newborn pup, clearly one of Bryn's lost babies. Its wet fur was matted with mud from the culvert, but somehow it had survived being swept away. With trembling hands, Nell pulled out her phone and dialed. "Renzo, I found them. You need to see this." She gave him the address, then worked to open the crate holding Bryn's pup. The mother dog nosed her baby gently, whimpering. The puppy was cold, its breathing shallow but alive. Nell shrugged off her jacket and wrapped it carefully around the newborn. "Hang on, little one," she murmured. "Help's coming?" The wait for Renzo felt endless. Nell documented everything with her phone's camera: the stacked crates, the conditions inside them, the concerning number of extremely young puppies. Each crate had paperwork attached in plastic sleeves, but something about them seemed off. The forms were too uniform, the information too neat, and none listed any legitimate rescue organization she recognized. Headlights swept across the storage unit's interior. Nell heard car doors slam, then Renzo's voice calling her name. "In here," she answered. "Unit 23. Renzo appeared in the doorway, his face grim as he took in the scene. 2 other animal control officers followed, equipment in hand. "How many?" he asked, already pulling out his tablet to document. "At least 30 crates," Nell reported, "most with multiple puppies. They're all too young to be away from their mothers." She gestured to the trembling pup in her jacket. "This one's Bryn's. Must have been grabbed after getting swept down the culvert." Renzo's jaw tightened as he examined the paperwork on the nearest crate. "These forms, they're good forgeries, but the details don't add up. No legitimate rescue moves puppies this young." One of the other officers was photographing each crate when his radio crackled. "Dispatch to Unit 4. Shelter director needs immediate contact regarding evidence seizure." Renzo took the call on his phone, his expression darkening as he listened. When he hung up, his hands were clenched. "Percival Rusk's attorney just called the shelter," he said quietly, "demanding immediate disposition of property and warning against tampering with what he claims are legally acquired animals." Nell's blood ran cold. Percival Rusk was one of the county's biggest names in dog breeding and animal auctions. His kennels were supposedly models of ethical breeding. But this was a transport pipeline for black market puppies. "We're taking everything as evidence," Renzo declared, his voice hard. "Every crate, every piece of paperwork. The county van's on its way." For the next hour, they carefully documented and transferred crates to the arriving vehicles. Each puppy was logged, photographed, and given a preliminary health check. The tiny newborn was rushed to the emergency vet, still wrapped in Nell's jacket. But as the last crates were loaded, Nell noticed one of the officers preparing a catch pole for Bryn. "Wait," she said. "What are you doing?" "She has to go into custody, too," Renzo explained gently. "She's evidence in an active case now. The shelter has to hold her until ownership is established." Nell looked at Bryn, who hadn't left her side throughout the whole process. The shepherd's eyes held such trust, such relief at finding her lost baby. After everything she'd been through, the trauma of birth, losing her puppies, the desperate search to find them, how could they lock her in a cage again? But more than that, Nell realized, custody meant Bryn would be in the system, available for whoever really owned her to claim. If this operation was as big as it seemed, how long before Rusk's lawyers found a way to make her disappear? Everything they'd just uncovered, the transport operation, the forged paperwork, the evidence of systematic trafficking, it could all lead back to Bryn and her puppies. Looking into those soulful brown eyes, Nell knew she couldn't let that happen. She watched as the last county van pulled away, its cargo of crated puppies secure. Behind her, the officer with the catch pole was approaching Bryn carefully. Everything they'd recovered tonight balanced on what happened next. Once Bryn entered the system, there would be no protecting her from whatever machine had put her in that culvert in the first place. The weight of the decision pressed on Nell's chest. She thought of Luke, of all the times he'd faced moments like this, when following procedure meant losing the very thing they were trying to protect. He'd always found a way to do what was right, even when it wasn't easy. Nell's heart pounded as she watched the officer approach with the catch pole. In that moment, she made her decision. "Wait," she called out firmly. "There's no need for that. She's with me." The officer paused, looking confused. Renzo stepped forward, his expression carefully neutral. "Nell, you understand what you're saying?" he asked quietly. She nodded, standing straighter. "I'm claiming responsibility for both Bryn and her puppy, as their emergency foster." The words came out stronger than she felt, but she knew they were right. Bryn pressed against her leg, as if sensing the tension in the air. The mother dog's trust in her felt like both a gift and a responsibility. Renzo studied her for a long moment, then turned to his colleague. "Mark them as pending intake. I'll handle the paperwork myself tomorrow." The other officer shrugged and lowered the catch pole. "Your call, Cabrini. Just make sure it's logged properly." Once the other vehicles had departed, leaving them alone in the dim light of the storage facility, Renzo turned to Nell. "You have somewhere safe to take them?" Nell thought of Luke's old workshop shed behind their house. She hadn't been able to bring herself to clear it out after his death, but now its isolation seemed perfect. "Yes, but I'll need supplies." "Give me 30 minutes, Renzo said. "I'll bring what you need." The drive home was tense, with Bryn curled protectively around her puppy in the back seat. Nell kept checking the rearview mirror, half expecting flashing lights to appear. But the streets remained empty in the pre-dawn darkness. The workshop stood exactly as Luke had left it, tools still hanging on pegboard walls, his deputy jacket draped over a chair. Nell's throat tightened as she unlocked the door. The space was small but secure, with solid walls and a good heater. Most importantly, it was hidden from the road by dense evergreens. She cleared a corner, laying down old blankets to make a nest. Bryn settled in immediately, carefully arranging herself around her tiny pup. The mother dog's eyes never left Nell's face, filled with a trust that made her chest ache. Renzo arrived as promised, his truck loaded with supplies, puppy formula, bottles, heating pads, medications, and more. As they unloaded everything, he filled her in on what he knew. "Rusk's operation is clever," he explained, setting up a feeding station. "His show kennels are spotless, state-of-the-art facilities, perfect inspection records, but it's just the front." Nell measured warm formula into a bottle while listening. "For puppy trafficking?" "Exactly. He takes in litters from unlicensed breeders, puppy mills, and launders them through his rescue program. Clean paperwork, hefty adoption fees, no questions asked about origins." Renzo's voice was bitter. "The mothers are disposed of once they're no longer profitable, usually on high-volume euthanasia days when nobody's looking too closely." "That's what was supposed to happen to Bryn," Nell realized, watching the mother dog gently clean her pup. Renzo nodded grimly. "The county shelter contract makes it easy. They get bonuses for quick turnover, how many animals they can process through intake and disposition. There's no incentive to investigate suspicious surrenders." "But now we have evidence," Nell said. "The crates, the paperwork." "It's a start," Renzo agreed. "But Rusk has powerful friends and good lawyers. We need more than just one night's seizure to bring down his whole operation." He paused, watching Nell bottle feed the tiny pup, while Bryn supervised anxiously. "These two could be key witnesses, proof of how the pipeline works, but only if we can keep them safe long enough to build a real case." Nell met his eyes, understanding the risk he was taking by helping her. "What do we do?" For now, we focus on 3 things, he said firmly. Protect Bryn. Get this little one stable and gather evidence carefully. We can't let them disappear into the system before we're ready. Looking down at mother and pup, Nell felt the weight of their trust. She thought of Luke, of how he'd taught her that sometimes doing the right thing meant working outside the system. We'll need to be careful, she said. Rusk will be looking for them. I'll run interference at the shelter, Renzo promised. Buy us some time with the paperwork, but you'll need to be extra cautious. No vet visits unless absolutely necessary. No telling anyone they're here. They spent the next hour setting up proper care stations, feeding, bedding, medical supplies. Renzo showed her how to tube feed the pup if necessary, and what warning signs to watch for. Through it all, Bryn remained calm, seeming to understand they were helping. As dawn began to lighten the sky, Renzo packed up to leave. I'll check in when I can, he said. But we'll need to be smart about communication. Nothing in writing, nothing that could be traced. Nell walked him to his truck, keeping her voice low. Thank you. For helping us. For understanding. He paused, hand on the door. I've watched Rusk's operation for years, knowing something was wrong but never able to prove it. Maybe this is our chance to finally expose the truth. His expression softened. Luke would be proud of what you're doing. After he drove away, Nell returned to the workshop. Bryn lifted her head, tail thumping gently against the blankets. The tiny pup was nursing, its future uncertain, but at least it was safe with its mother. Nell settled onto Luke's old chair, prepared for a long vigil. They had chosen their path, to protect these innocent lives and pursue justice, no matter the cost. Now they just had to be strong enough to see it through. Nell's fingers trembled as she typed the online listing. German Shepherd puppies wanted. Private buyer, cash ready. She added details that matched Rusk's usual sales patterns, hoping to draw out one of his couriers. The marked bills sat heavy in her jacket pocket, each serial number carefully recorded. Across town, Renzo parked his animal control truck where he could watch the meeting spot, a quiet corner of the mall parking lot. He'd chosen his position carefully, out of sight from fellow officers who might feel pressured by the shelter's contract with Rusk. The wait stretched like taffy. Nell paced beside her car, checking her phone every few minutes. A sleek black SUV rolled past twice before finally stopping. The driver, wearing dark sunglasses despite the cloudy day, stepped out with a puppy carrier. You the buyer? He asked, keeping his distance. Nell nodded, forcing her hands to stay steady as she counted out the cash. The puppy in the carrier whimpered, too young to be away from its mother. Her heart clenched, thinking of Freya and her pup safely hidden in Luke's workshop. The exchange was quick. Renzo photographed everything from his vantage point, capturing faces and license plates. But as Nell drove home, a chill crept up her spine. The black SUV had fallen into place behind her. She took 3 extra turns, confirming her suspicion. They were following her. Her palms grew sweaty on the steering wheel as she remembered Luke's voice. Never lead them home if you're being tailed. She drove to the grocery store instead, losing them in the busy lot. But the warning had been sent. When Nell finally reached home hours later, her heart stopped. The workshop door hung crooked on its hinges. Inside, supplies lay scattered and torn. Freya and her pup were safely hidden in the false bottom cabinet Luke had built years ago, but the message was clear. A long knife scratch marred her front door, deep enough to splinter the wood. It's okay, girl, Nell whispered, hands shaking as she checked mother and pup. They didn't find you. Freya pressed against her leg, whining softly. Something about the dog's alert posture tugged at Nell's memory. While cleaning up the mess, she found it, an old canine harness knocked from a high shelf. The leather was cracked with age, but the badge number was still visible. Nell's breath caught. She knew that number. Her laptop booted slowly as her mind raced. The department records took time to load, but there it was. Canine Unit 472, Freya, Luke's partner before his death. Listed as retired, then marked unadoptable after an injury near Rusk's property. Nell's hands flew to her mouth as she stared at Bryn. No, at Freya. The dog met her gaze steadily, and suddenly every familiar gesture made sense. The way she responded to hand signals, her protective instincts, the old scar down her foreleg that matched the injury report. "Oh God," Nell whispered. "It's you. It's really you." Freya's tail thumped once, gentle recognition in her amber eyes. She hadn't failed Luke that night. Someone had taken her out of service first, making sure she couldn't protect her handler when he needed her most. Tears spilled down Nell's cheeks as the truth sank in. This wasn't just about exposing puppy trafficking anymore. This was personal, a thread that led straight back to Luke's death. Freya had been removed, silenced, and nearly killed to protect Rusk's operation. And now she had found her way back, bringing evidence of even darker crimes. Nell's grief crystallized into something harder. She pulled out her phone to text Renzo. "Found proof. This goes deeper than we thought. Need to meet." Freya pressed close, her warmth steady and familiar. The tiny pup nursed quietly, unaware of the storm building around them. Nell scratched behind Freya's ears, exactly where she had always liked it. "We'll make this right," she promised, her voice thick with emotion. "For Luke, for you, for all of them." The knife scratch in her door seemed to mock her resolve, but Nell refused to be intimidated. They had tried to bury the truth, but it had literally come back to find her. Now she just had to be strong enough to expose it all, no matter what it cost. She took photos of the damage and the harness, documenting everything. Then she reinforced the workshop's security, adding extra locks and a motion sensor. They would need more than threats to stop her now. The truth about Freya had changed everything. This wasn't just duty anymore, it was personal reckoning. As night fell, Nell sat beside Freya, watching her nurse her pup. The German Shepherd's presence felt different now, heavy with shared history and loss. But there was comfort, too, in finally understanding why she had felt such a connection from the start. "You came back to finish what they interrupted," Nell murmured. "To make things right." Freya's eyes met hers with that same steady intelligence that had made her such a good canine partner. Together, they had a chance to expose not just the puppy trafficking, but the corruption that had cost Luke his life. The knife scratch in her door was meant to frighten her away. Instead, it had helped her find the truth. Now she just had to stay alive long enough to prove it. Nell spread the paperwork across her kitchen table, piecing together fragments like a puzzle. Clinic reports, transfer logs, and retirement documents created a disturbing pattern. Her fingers traced each date, each signature, building a timeline that made her stomach churn. "Look at this," she said to Renzo, who stood examining another stack. "Freya's alert records stop exactly 3 weeks before her injury. All incidents near Rusk's transport routes." Renzo leaned over, his weathered hands careful with the brittle papers. "And here, the vet assessment claiming decreased performance, signed by a clinic that closed 6 months ago. I checked." "They didn't just retire her," Nell's voice shook. "They targeted her specifically, the only K9 consistently marking those trucks." In the workshop, Freya dozed beside her nursing pup, unaware of the evidence mounting on the table. But the truth was clear in every falsified document, every carefully orchestrated step that had removed her from duty. The retirement wasn't because she failed, Nell said, anger building in her chest. It was because she succeeded too well. She could smell what he was hiding. Renzo nodded grimly. Rusk couldn't risk a trained nose that couldn't be bought, so he manufactured a reason to sideline her. The realization shifted everything. This wasn't just about exposing a puppy mill anymore. This was about piercing the carefully constructed shield around Rusk's public image. The donations to animal charities, the pristine show kennels, the county contracts that kept investigations superficial. "We need to hit him where he can't control the story," Nell said, pacing the kitchen. "Something public, documented, that he can't smooth over with lawyers and paperwork." Renzo watched her, understanding dawning in his eyes. "You're thinking about forcing his hand?" "An adoption event," Nell said, the plan forming as she spoke. "Very public, very visible. We set up a legitimate-looking rescue day, but we mark the cash and document everything. When his transport shows up, we catch the whole exchange on camera," Renzo finished, "with witnesses present." They spent hours refining the details. The timing had to be perfect. Freya's pup was stronger now, able to travel short distances, but they couldn't risk separation. Every movement would need careful coordination. "We'll need multiple cameras," Renzo said, sketching a rough layout, "and people we can trust to maintain sight lines without being obvious." Nell studied the clinic records again. "His transport patterns suggest bi-weekly deliveries, if we time this right." They worked through the night, building their trap. Every document told the same story, of power wielded through paperwork, of a system manipulated to remove obstacles. But papers could be turned against their makers. "We'll need to move fast once we start," Renzo warned. "Rusk's lawyers will try to shut it down the moment they catch wind. Then we make sure the evidence is undeniable before they can." Nell's voice held steel. "No more hiding, behind contracts and legal threats." She glanced at the workshop where Freya slept. The German Shepherd had found her way back, despite everything they'd done to silence her. Now she would help expose not just the current crimes, but the corruption that had cost Luke his life. They set the date for 2 weeks out, enough time to organize but not so long that Rusk could sense the trap. The pup would be strong enough to travel safely by then. Nell would oversee the mother and baby, while Renzo coordinated with trusted colleagues to document everything. "One shot at this," Renzo said quietly. "We have to make it count." Nell nodded, looking at the evidence scattered across her table. Years of calculated manipulation reduced to paper trails that would finally serve justice instead of concealing it. "They thought retiring Freya would protect them," she said. "Instead, she came back to finish what they interrupted, and this time we'll make sure everyone sees the truth." The first light of dawn crept through her windows as they finalized their plans. In the workshop, Freya stirred, checking her pup with gentle attention. Soon they would help expose the man who had tried to silence them both. But for now, they rested, gathering strength for the fight ahead. Nell gathered the documents carefully, filing them away as evidence. Each page was another piece of armor against Rusk's inevitable counterattack. The public image he'd built so carefully would become his weakness, because this time, there would be nowhere to hide. The morning sun cast long shadows across the parking lot of the community center as Nell checked her watch for the 10th time. 7:30 in the morning. Everything had to be perfect. "Tables are set up," a volunteer called out, arranging adoption forms in neat stacks. Nell nodded, her heart pounding. They'd chosen their helpers carefully, mostly retired shelter workers who knew how legitimate rescue operations should look. Renzo appeared at her elbow, speaking in low tones. "State Investigator Marcus is parked across the street. He'll stay back unless we signal." "Good." Nell fought to keep her voice steady. "Did you brief him?" "Just enough. He knows to document everything but not intervene. Renzo adjusted his animal control badge, making sure it caught the light. They needed to look official, but not threatening. Volunteers scattered across the lot, phones tucked discreetly in pockets or propped on tables, looking like they were just setting up for a normal adoption event. Every angle was covered. Nothing would happen without being recorded. Nell had stationed Freya and her pup in her car at the far end of the lot, windows cracked. The mother dog lay quietly in the back seat, her baby secured in a padded carrier. Close enough to watch, far enough to stay safe. "Here we go," Renzo murmured as the first van pulled in. White, unmarked, exactly like the ones they'd tracked from Rusk's property. Right on schedule. The driver stepped. Out, all business, clipboard in hand. "Got 6 rescues for placement today." Nell stepped forward, playing her part. "Welcome. Let's get your paperwork started." Her fingers brushed the marked bills in her pocket, serial numbers all carefully recorded. More vehicles arrived as they processed the first batch. Everything followed the pattern they'd documented. Pristine papers, uniform crates, clipped tags. No legitimate rescue operation ran this smoothly. Renzo moved between the vans with his scanner, checking microchips. "Note the sequence," he said quietly into his phone's voice memo. "Consecutive numbers, same manufacturer, factory fresh." The morning unfolded with precise choreography. Cash changed hands, all their marked bills, now mixing into the transport drivers' money pouches. Volunteers captured every exchange while appearing to take adoption photos. Phones recorded hushed conversations about quotas and delivery schedules. Near the edge of the lot, Nell caught glimpses of the state investigator's car. Just watching. Building the case. Her hands shook slightly as she processed another form. "Transport log shows 3 more incoming," a volunteer whispered, passing by with a water bottle. "Right on schedule." The pieces were falling into place. 4 hours in, they had documented everything. The routes, the handoffs, the money trail, all the proof they'd needed but couldn't get through official channels. Renzo's careful notes would back every photo, every video. Freya stayed calm in the car, occasionally lifting her head to watch. Her pup slept soundly in the carrier, unaware of the evidence building that would protect their future. Nell checked on them between paperwork sessions, drawing strength from their presence. "This is working," Renzo said during a quiet moment, his voice tight with contained excitement. "Every single transport matches the patterns we tracked. The marked money is spreading through their system. We've got them, Nell." She nodded, hardly daring to believe it. After weeks of preparation, months of investigation, years of Rusk operating untouched, they were finally building a case he couldn't charm or buy his way out of. The state investigator's presence added weight to every document, every recording. This wasn't just a rogue investigation anymore. They were creating an official record, piece by piece. By early afternoon, they had processed 15 different transports, each one documented, each exchange captured from multiple angles. The marked bills had filtered through at least 4 different handlers, enough to prove a pattern of organized trafficking. "Last scheduled arrival in 20 minutes, Renzo said, checking his phone. They'd known it would be a long day, but the tension made every hour feel like 3. Nell rolled her shoulders, trying to release some strain. They couldn't celebrate yet, but she allowed herself to feel cautiously optimistic. The evidence chain was solid. Every transaction would justify the warrants they'd need. She walked back to check on Freya, who thumped her tail in greeting. "Almost done, girl," Nell whispered. The German Shepherd's presence grounded her, a reminder of why they'd taken this risk. This wasn't just about exposing current crimes, it was about justice long delayed. The final transport arrived right on time. More papers shuffled, More marked bills entered the system. Renzo documented the last microchip sequence, while volunteers captured the handoff from 3 different angles. As the van pulled away, Nell met Renzo's eyes across the lot. They'd done it. Hours of meticulous evidence gathering, all building toward warrants that would finally pierce Rusk's carefully maintained facade. The state investigator's car pulled away quietly, taking copies of their documentation to secure channels. They had succeeded beyond their careful planning, created an evidence chain too solid to ignore or explain away. Nell's shoulders finally relaxed as she helped the volunteers pack up. Their trap had worked perfectly. For the first time since finding Freya by that flooded culvert, she felt the balance of power shift. They had outmaneuvered Rusk on his own territory, using his precise system against him. Renzo joined her as the lot emptied, his face showing the same careful hope she felt. "It's good work, Nell. Real good work." She nodded, watching the last volunteers leave. They had done more than gather evidence. They had created a record of truth that would be impossible to erase. Behind them, Freya watched through the car window, her pup sleeping peacefully beside her. They had all come so far from that rainy night. Now, finally, they had the proof to make things right. The victory crumbled in a single phone call. Renzo's voice crackled through Nell's cell phone, tight with panic. "The birthing barn. It's on fire. Rusk must have known. The transport logs were a distraction." Nell's blood ran cold. The birthing barn where they'd temporarily housed Freya's pup during the sting operation. Her hands trembled as she gripped the steering wheel, turning sharply onto the dirt road leading to Rusk's property. Orange flames lit up the night sky ahead, casting an evil glow through the trees. Thick black smoke billowed upward, carried by the wind. Beside her in the passenger seat, Freya whined, picking up on Nell's distress. "Gates blocked," Renzo's voice came again. "Someone jackknifed a truck across the entrance. Fire crews can't get through. I'm trying to find another way in." Nell's heart pounded as she approached the scene. The heat hit her first, waves of it rolling through her open windows. Then the smoke, thick and choking. She pulled off onto a side access road she remembered from old property maps. "I'm going around back," she told Renzo. "There's a maintenance trail that leads behind the barn. Nell, wait for backup. The whole structure could go at any minute." But she couldn't wait. Not with living creatures trapped. Inside. Not with Freya's pup, their key evidence of Rusk's breeding operation, at risk. The German Shepherd in her passenger seat trembled, torn between staying with Nell and responding to the desperate cries coming from the burning building. The maintenance road was rough, jostling them violently as Nell pushed her truck as fast as she dared. Through the trees, she could see the barn fully engulfed now. The heat grew more intense with every yard closer. She skidded to a stop 50 feet from the rear of the building. The roar of the fire was deafening. Waves of heat distorted the air between her and the barn's back doors. Those doors, their only access point, were warped and fused by the intense temperature. "Stay here, girl," Nell ordered Freya, but the dog was already out of the truck, pacing anxiously. More cries came from inside, weak, terrified sounds that made Freya whimper in response. Nell pulled her jacket over her face and approached the doors. The heat was blistering, singeing her eyebrows even from several feet away. The metal handles would melt skin on contact. Above, the roof groaned ominously, the whole structure threatening to collapse. A faint whine pierced through the roar of flames. It came from near ground level, maybe through gaps in the warped door. Nell dropped to her hands and knees, ignoring how the hot ground burned through her jeans. "Hello? Anyone in there?" she shouted. More whimpering answered her. Not just Freya's pup. There were multiple animals trapped inside. Rusk was burning all his evidence, living and otherwise. Records, breeding stock, everything that could tie him to the trafficking operation. The roof creaked again, louder this time. Chunks of burning debris rained down inside. Time was running out. Nell looked back at Freya, saw the agony of indecision in the dog's amber eyes. Stay with her human partner or try to save her pup and the others. The heat was unbearable now. Nell's skin felt tight and blistered just from kneeling this close. Smoke burned her lungs with every breath. But she could hear them in there, scared, suffering, dying. Everything they'd worked to expose and save, literally going up in flames. Another section of roof collapsed with a thunderous crash. The whole building shuddered. What remained would come down any minute, burying everything and everyone inside. The choice crystallized in that moment. Back away and survive, or try to save them and likely die in the attempt. All their careful planning, the evidence gathering, the marked money trail, none of it would matter if they lost the living proof of Rusk's cruelty. Freya pressed against Nell's side, trembling. The dog's maternal instinct warred with her training, her loyalty to Nell battling the desperate need to reach her pup. Another whimper from inside made them both flinch. The roof groaned one final time, a deep, splintering sound that meant total collapse was seconds away. Time had run out. They had to choose. Now, retreat to safety or risk everything on a desperate rescue attempt. Nell's hands clenched into fists as she stared at those warped doors, feeling the suffocating heat press in from all sides. The decision would haunt her either way. But which path could she live with? The screams from within grew weaker, fading under the roar of the inferno. The choice was made in an instant. Freya's muscles tensed, and before Nell could react, the German shepherd snatched her newborn pup by the scruff and thrust it into Nell's arms with desperate urgency. Their eyes met for a split second, Freya's filled with both fear and determination. "No, girl, wait!" Nell cried. But Freya had already turned, ramming her powerful shoulder against the warped door. The metal gave way with a screech, and she disappeared into the inferno. Nell clutched the tiny pup to her chest, its weak cries barely audible over the roar of flames. Inside, chaos reigned. Through gaps in the buckling walls, Nell could see Freya's dark shape moving through the smoke. The dog's sharp barks cut through the din, driving panic-frozen animals toward a sagging side door. Her police training kicked in as she herded them to safety. 1, then 2, then 3 dogs stumbling out into the night air. The roof screamed another warning. Massive beams shifted overhead, showering sparks and burning debris. Nell's heart clenched as Freya disappeared deeper into the barn, instead of retreating. "Freya!" she shouted. "Get out of there!" But the dog had caught a scent, or heard something human ears couldn't detect through the flames. She vanished into a pocket of thick smoke near the back of the barn. Seconds stretched like hours as Nell waited, holding her breath. Then Freya emerged, dragging something larger than a dog. It was a person, a teenage girl, her clothes smoldering. Freya had the girl's jacket collar gripped in her teeth, pulling her inch by determined inch toward the exit. "Hold on!" Nell wanted desperately to help, but she couldn't put down Freya's pup. The tiny creature was their only proof of the breeding operation, and she had to trust Freya to complete her rescue. The girl stirred, coughing violently. She tried to crawl, helping Freya drag her forward. They were almost to the door when a massive section of roof collapsed behind them, sending a blast of superheated air that nearly knocked Nell off her feet. Finally, Freya pulled the girl clear of the building. The teenager collapsed on the ground, gulping clean air between racking coughs. Her face was streaked with soot, but Nell recognized her from photos in Rusk's office, his niece, Tamsin. Sirens wailed closer. Through the smoke, Nell saw flashing lights approaching on the main road, still blocked by the jackknifed gate. A familiar pickup truck was ramming the barrier repeatedly. Tamsin grabbed Nell's sleeve with trembling fingers. "Uncle Perce," she rasped, eyes wide with fear and anger. He ordered this, said to clean house. I couldn't let them burn." The confirmation sent chills down Nell's spine, despite the blistering heat. Rusk had tried to destroy everything, including his own niece, to cover his tracks. The sound of metal tearing apart cut through the night. Renzo had finally broken through the gate, clearing the way for emergency vehicles. Fire trucks roared up the drive seconds later, crews jumping into action with hoses and equipment. Nell knelt beside Freya, who stood trembling on badly burned paws. The dog's legs were scorched, her coat singed, but her eyes remained alert as she checked her pup. The tiny creature squirmed in Nell's arms, stronger than seemed possible for its size. "You crazy brave girl," Nell whispered, pulling Freya close. "I can't believe what you just did." Paramedics swarmed around Tamsin, fitting an oxygen mask over her face. But the girl pushed it aside, struggling to speak. "I'll tell everything," she said, voice raw from smoke. "The breeding, the fake papers, the mothers they got rid of. I helped with the books. I know where all the records are backed up. Uncle Perce thinks he destroyed it all, but I've been keeping copies." Renzo jogged up, his face streaked with sweat and grime from fighting through the gate. "You okay?" he asked, looking from Nell to Tamsin to Freya. "We've got our witness," Nell said, "and our proof." She nodded to the pup, then to Freya's burned paws, evidence of Rusk's desperate attempt to silence the truth. Firefighters worked to contain the blaze, but the barn was already a total loss. Yet what mattered most had survived, the living proof of Rusk's operation, and the courage of those who refused to let him bury his crimes in ashes. Tamsin gripped Nell's hand as paramedics prepared to transport her. "I'm sorry I didn't speak up sooner," she said. "I was scared. But seeing Freya run in like that, she didn't hesitate to do the right thing no matter the cost. I want to be that brave." Nell squeezed the girl's hand. "You already are. You tried to save them, and now you're standing up to tell the truth. That takes real courage." As emergency crews swarmed the scene, Nell sat with Freya while a vet examined her burns. The dog kept her nose pressed to her pup, breathing in its scent as if to reassure herself it was truly safe. Her sacrifice had saved not just her own baby, but the other dogs and Tamsin too. The flames gradually died under the firefighters' assault, reducing the barn to smoldering ruins. But from those ashes, something powerful had emerged, the unshakable proof of both Rusk's crimes and the extraordinary bonds between those who fought to expose them. Freya's pup squirmed and squeaked, demanding attention. Despite her injuries, the mother dog's tail wagged slightly at the sound. She had risked everything, trusting Nell to protect her baby while she did what needed to be done. That trust would not be forgotten. Nell sat cross-legged on her living room floor, gently cleaning Freya's burned paw. The German shepherd lay still, her trust evident in her relaxed posture despite the pain. The pup nursed nearby, growing stronger each day. "Almost done, girl," Nell murmured, carefully wrapping fresh gauze around the injury. Her phone buzzed, a text from Renzo. "Warrant approved. Moving at dawn." Her hands trembled slightly as she secured the bandage. After everything they'd documented, the marked bills, Tamsin's testimony about the breeding operation, the fire, they finally had their chance to bring Rusk down legally. Freya's amber eyes watched her intently, reading her tension. Nell found herself remembering Luke, her late husband, working with this same dog years ago. The command he'd always used came naturally to her lips now. "With me," she whispered, her voice catching. It was the first time she'd spoken those words since Luke's death. Freya's ears perked forward, recognition flickering in her gaze. The command held weight, years of partnership, trust, and shared purpose. Renzo arrived an hour later with the tactical plans. They spread them across Nell's kitchen table, while Freya kept watch from her bed in the corner. "We hit the showcase kennel during tomorrow's morning transfer," Renzo explained, pointing to the layout. "That's when they move dogs between facilities. Maximum evidence in transit." Nell nodded, studying the entry points. "Who goes where?" "State team takes the main office. They'll secure computers and files. County units cover all exits. You and I focus on the transfer area with the evidence team. Chain of custody has to be perfect." "And Freya?" "Stays in the vehicle with her pup until we need positive identification. No risks." Renzo's expression softened. "You've both been through enough." Nell checked her watch. 6 hours until dawn. Her stomach churned with nervous energy, but her mind was clear. This wasn't just about exposing a cruel operation anymore. It was about justice for all the mother dogs discarded by Rusk's greed. It was about Luke's final call to that property, and what had really happened to his partner. It was about restoring Freya's true name and history. She gathered her gear methodically. Camera, evidence bags, backup radio. Each item checked and double-checked. Freya watched her preparations with keen interest, recognizing the familiar routine of preparation. "Rest while you can," Nell told her, scratching behind her ears. "Tomorrow we make this right." The night passed slowly. Nell dozed fitfully in her recliner, not wanting to miss the dawn call. Freya remained alert beside her, occasionally checking her pup, but always returning to her post. When Renzo's message finally came, "Green light," Nell felt oddly calm. Fear had burned away, leaving only purpose. She helped Freya and the pup into her truck's back seat, then took her place in the convoy. They moved out quietly, coordinated teams heading to assigned positions. The morning fog shrouded their approach. Nell caught Freya's reflection in her rearview mirror. The dog sat tall, despite her injuries, ready to face whatever came next. This was it. The moment when all their careful planning would either expose years of cruelty or crumble in their hands. But looking at Freya's determined posture, Nell knew they'd already won something vital. The recovery of trust long deferred, and the chance to make things right. The dawn raid unfolded with precise coordination. Deputies moved through Rusk's showcase kennel in swift, practiced formations. Their boots echoed on concrete floors as they secured each section. Through her radio earpiece, Nell heard teams calling out, "Section A clear!" "Loading dock secured." The methodical sweep continued while she and Renzo approached the main office. A commotion erupted ahead, the sound of metal scraping and hurried footsteps. They rounded the corner to find Percival Rusk frantically loading files into a waiting van, his face twisted with desperation. "Step away from the vehicle," Renzo commanded, his voice steady and authoritative. Freya, who had been cleared to assist once the initial sweep confirmed no immediate threats, stood alert at Nell's side. Her ears suddenly pricked forward, nose twitching. She padded purposefully toward Rusk's office wall, her bandaged paw not slowing her determination. "She's got something," Nell said, following the German shepherd's lead. Freya scratched at a section of wooden paneling that looked perfectly ordinary, except for the faintest seam visible only at dog's eye level. Renzo found the hidden latch. The false wall swung open to reveal shelves lined with ledgers, scanning equipment, and stacks of falsified papers, interstate shipping manifests, forged health certificates, everything they needed to prove the trafficking operation crossed state lines. "It's over, Rusk," Nell said quietly. The kennel owner's face transformed from desperate to dangerous. In one fluid motion, he reached behind his desk and whipped out a shotgun. "Nobody's taking my business," he snarled. Renzo moved faster than Nell had ever seen him move. He crossed the space in 2 long strides, catching Rusk's wrist and twisting. The shotgun clattered to the floor as the 2 men grappled. "Nell, the evidence!" Renzo shouted as he fought to subdue Rusk. She rushed to gather the documents, stuffing them into evidence bags. The floor suddenly shuddered beneath her feet. The old catwalk above the holding pit, a deep concrete channel used for waste management, was giving way after years of neglect. Metal groaned. Concrete dust rained down. The catwalk buckled, pitching Nell toward the edge of the pit. Her feet slipped on crumbling concrete. For one heart-stopping moment, she felt nothing but air beneath her. Then, pressure on her sleeve. Freya had clamped her jaws around the fabric, her powerful body straining backward, acting as an anchor. The dog's burned paw must have been screaming with pain, but she held firm. "Hold on!" Renzo had Rusk secured, and was rushing to help. He grabbed Nell's arms, and together with Freya's steady grip, they pulled her to safety. Backup deputies swarmed in, taking control of Rusk and securing the scene. The evidence team carefully cataloged everything from behind the false wall. Outside, animal control officers were already processing the seized transport vehicles. Rusk's empire crumbled in a single morning. The charges stacked up: animal cruelty, racketeering, arson, and attempted assault. His arrest was broadcast on local news, the footage showing him being led away in handcuffs while investigators carried box after box of evidence from his office. The state review was swift and decisive. The county's contract, the one that had incentivized quick euthanasia over proper investigation, was voided. New oversight measures were put in place. In the aftermath, Nell stood in her backyard watching Freya play gently with her growing pup. The official papers had come through. Freya was legally hers now, her true name restored. The pup had found a loving home with a family who understood the significance of his survival. The screen door creaked. Renzo stepped out, carrying 2 plates of lasagna. He'd started staying for supper more often lately, not out of obligation or rescue, but choice. They settled into deck chairs, while Freya trotted over to lie at their feet. Nell looked at her small family, the dog who had never failed, only been failed by others, the man who chose to stay, the quiet life they were building. It wasn't a rescue story anymore. It was simply their story, and it was just beginning. Thank you for watching. Stories like this remind us who we are. If something touched your heart, go ahead and subscribe. I'll be back tomorrow with another story that just might stay with you.